All right, everyone. Thank you for waiting. And good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Bernard. I'm a bookseller here at Politics and Prose. On behalf of the owners and of the staff, I'd like to welcome all of you to this evening's event. As you may already know, Politics and Prose hosts hundreds of in person events, uh, partnered events, supported events, trips, and classes. So please check our website for a full list. Before we get started today, I'd like to ask all of you to please turn off or silence your cell phones so as not to disrupt the event. And when we get to the Q&A portion, please line up at this microphone over here by this pillar before asking your questions. It is my honor to introduce all of you to Hawa Hassan. Hawa is a James Beard Award winner, host of Food Network's Hawa at Home and cooking channel Spice of Life, acclaimed author of In Bibi's Kitchen, and founder and CEO of Basbas, makers of African-inspired sauces and condiments. An acclaimed speaker and presenter, Hawa has been covered by major international media, including the New York Times, Vogue, Vanity Fair, and many others. Tonight, she will be talking about her new book, Setting a Place for Us: Recipes and Stories of Displacement, Resilience, and Community from 8 countries impacted by war. In this important work of culinary literature, Hawa shines a spotlight on countries impacted by conflict by presenting their culture and history through essays and recipes. In their review of the book, Epicurious writes that Setting a Place for Us is more than a cookbook. It's a journey through 8 countries' histories and tells the real stories of displaced people. Hawa will be in conversation with Joe Yonan, a cookbook author and longtime food writer and editor. He is the author of several books for 10 Speed Press, the most recent being Mastering the Art of Plant Based Cooking, which was named one of the best cookbooks of the year by NPR, the New York Times, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, Esquire, and more. His previous book, Cool Beans, was a bestseller and nominated for a James Beard Foundation Award. And since 2006, Joe has been food and dining editor at the Washington Post, where he has won two James Beard Awards for food coverage. Everyone, let us all welcome Hawa Hassan and Joe Yonan.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for coming. I was telling Hawa in the back that the real reason that I agreed to do this was because she and I had never met in person, and we've had many Zoom conversations. So it was like finally get to meet.
Crazy.
Yes.
I feel like I know you.
Yes.
Well, I do know you.
Yes. So your feeling is correct. So this is an incredible book. This is, as Epicurus was saying, this is not just a cookbook. This is very much not just a cookbook. Why did you want to do this?
So the idea for this book bloomed long before I was even in food. This started around 2014. I was visiting my family in Oslo for 6 months, and while I was there, and I should go back a little bit. I was born in Somalia, just as we were on the brink of civil unrest. I left home altogether, Africa, when I was 7, parting from my own family, and then reuniting with them in 2008 in Norway. And when I reunited with them, I remember feeling so othered in my own life. I was like, these people are loud, they're crazy, there's so many of them. And very quickly, I started to think about my own story and how I'd even erased my own identity just trying to fit in Seattle, Washington. I wanted to be nothing more than the girl next door. I was like everyone's best friend. I was a great basketball player. I had played on every varsity team you could think of, AU teams in the summer. But I kept going because I had a deeper desire to figure out my own history and my own story, because there were moments where I'd be in the dynamic of my family and I would feel like, yeah, I belong here. And so in 2014, when I was thinking about how I was going to tell better stories about who I was and where I'd come from, I started to think about what would that vehicle be, and ultimately it became consumer packaged goods. And then I started to write down all the other things that were going to come after. And this book was always meant to come after In Bibi's Kitchen, because I thought by the time I was done with In Bibi's Kitchen, I would have figured out some of the kinks of my own life, some therapy, some like real friendships. And that's really how it came to be. I wanted to examine my own story, and I really wanted to tell a different story about what it meant to be from these displaced countries.
And why food as the medium through which to tell those stories? What is it about food that you think lends itself to that?
I think food is a conduit. I think food invites empathy. I think food, you can go to a table and very quickly make a friend. I think we have less disagreements when we're eating together. I mean, sometimes the disagreement can be about the dish, but that's, I think, for me, a healthy conversation. So for me, it's just my vehicle for advocacy.
Yeah. So, of course, as you know, and everyone here knows, this book is coming at a interesting time in America, and with the administration's attention to immigration and refugees. And has that, how has that affected the way you're thinking about the book? Did you have any idea that it might be more resonant because of the politics?
I think it's timely. Like In Bibi's Kitchen was in 2020, when so many of us were desperate for community and were, holed up in our homes by ourselves. I think in spite of everything we're going through, like, this book is not that. This book is joy, it's celebration, it's community, it's love. It's about people who've never left home because they have placed it on themselves to be the caretakers of their land. You'll, in the El Salvadorian chapter, you'll meet Senor Francisco Martinez, and he had no desire to not be a coffee manager from the time. He started when he was 19, and now he's in his 80s, and him and his wife Maria live on a top of a mountain, and they manage their coffee farm. So there are people who've left and started over, and we talk to them in this book, and everyone has the same longing. There it's safety, here it's safety, but the questions are the same. How do we get kids to school? What do we put on the table for dinner tonight?
Yeah. So how did you choose the countries? There are 8 countries.
Yeah. So prolonged conflict, like my own Somalia. We've been in civil unrest for 40 plus years, which is crazy to say. Historical facts. Iraq is it's the ancient civilization, ancient civilization on Earth. And then just culturally dense foods.
Yes.
I thought, oh my God, why are we not talking about Lebanon in the way that we talk about Italy?
Right.
The wines, the foods, the people, the land.
Right. I think that there's a way in which your book ends up celebrating these smaller diversities that some of us didn't even, people talk about, as talk about the various countries in Europe, knowing the most minute details about the differences, whereas,
one brush.
Whole parts of the India, Africa, most of the Middle East, is one brush. Was that part of your goal, to try to distinguish those cuisines?
Well, my goal is to get people to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to do the work for the reader. It's your own conclusion to come to.
I love that.
You know about that.
I do know about that. Yeah.
You basically turned me into a vegetarian with your last book.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hawa helped me with my last book. So I'm tempted to make a South Africa joke, but I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to let it go. We're not going to talk about why you didn't focus on any refugees, any white South African farmers who are clearly so under the gun right now. But I am very curious about a lot of the process, because this must have been a very difficult book to research and document. So how did you go about doing it? You weren't able to go to all the countries, I think I read in your intro, right?
Yeah. So the places I didn't physically get to go to, like Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Egypt, we hired a slew of teams. So just for the Afghani chapter, there are 5 photographers that shoot that chapter. So I worked with Zeba Foods. I don't know if you know them. They work with a collaborative of farmers, and so they did the groundwork for me. In Yemen, I worked with a coffee grower, Mukhtar, who's based in San Francisco, and he set me up with Sumaya, who shot the book in that chapter. And then, 10 Speed, I don't know if they were kind enough, but I know they agreed to it. They let me hire cultural editors and pay them properly because I don't know everything. I just am too ambitious for my own good. And so they allowed me to hire people who were much smarter than me to do a bunch of research on my behalf and for the book. And then the places we were, when I couldn't physically go, I think the thing that I was really focused on was to make sure that I got the tone of the thing correct. And so that went through it went through some processes as well.
Yeah, I'm really curious how you ended up picking both the people, the voices that you wanted to focus on, and then of course how you, as a fellow cookbook author, how you ended up deciding about the recipes and which recipes you focused on. What were some of the things that you were going for?
So there's only 8 recipes in each chapter. And when you do it that way, it makes it easier and more simple. And so the number one focus, and I worked with Amy Stevenson, who's a longtime collaborator of mine. The number one focus was, does this look like an Egyptian kitchen? Does this reflect an Egyptian kitchen? And so once Amy watched, I think she watched hundreds of hours of YouTube videos and documents and books and research. So then we would write the recipe, we would test it. Sometimes we would do video calls while I was on the road. And then we would send it to people from these countries and say, and the way we were hoping to do it, but it didn't work out that way, is that I would take these recipes on the road with me and say, does this look correct? But we didn't get to do it like that. And so sometimes I met people on the road and then we sent them the manuscript or that chapter and said, does this reflect your country? Does this look like an Iraqi kitchen? And, there were some things we were corrected on, like in Lebanon or in the Iraqi chapter, there's a lentil soup, but it's a ade lentil soup because you have to put the ade to indicate what the soup is going to be. And those were like little things we didn't know.
What does ade mean?
It's like soup of.
Okay.
And
okay.
so
I see. So you just had to get the
instead of
wording
just
right.
saying like lentil.
Okay.
So these things we discovered just by talking to people. And sometimes I think like, oh my God, what if we just published it?
Right.
What if we co-opted these people's recipes and inserted ourselves?
Yeah, no, not good. But you wouldn't do that, no.
I try not to.
How did you walk the line in the book between, trying to have recipes that really represented the cultures and the places? I'll use the word accurately. I mean, I kind of hate the idea of authenticity and everything, as you know, it's kind of loaded. But how did you walk the line between trying to find something that represented the certain culture's kitchen, as you say, but also being appealing for
the home cook,
for the whole potential readership of the book that might just be picking it up at a place like Politics and Prose and leafing through it?
Yeah, so we stayed true to the techniques and the flavors of the recipes. And then what we did was we try to offer substitutes where it was possible.
Got it.
And we talk a lot about that in the head notes.
Can you think of some examples where it's particularly telling the kinds of substitutes that you needed to offer?
Yeah, like we like this recipe that I'm currently obsessed with, this Egyptian recipe, mishmish or fil mahish, and it's stuffed bell peppers.
Yeah.
And so, we talk about like, if you don't like this herb, it's fine, even though parsley is what's used in this country in a way that it isn't here. I mean, it's used on everything.
Yeah.
You could use another herb. You don't even have to use the herb altogether. So we make suggestions like that. And then there's certain things like we make suggestions for zaitar if you want to substitute that out.
No.
I know.
Sorry.
But there's some people, they're like, oh, this is too much pistachio. And so we make substitutes for those things or make suggestions, but we don't waver on flavor.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Well, the recipe that I am obsessed with is the Yemeni shakshuka,
Yes.
which I had never seen shakshuka like this before. Do you want to
No,
explain to
you
people
tell
how
me
it's?
a little bit about it.
Oh, well, it's
Because
shakshuka is usually
eggs
eggs
and
poached in a sauce, kind of
eggs
cold.
purgatory.
Yeah. And this one, the eggs are scrambled with the other ingredients, so it
Yeah.
ends up almost being a little bit more like, well,
A soft
I'm
scramble.
yeah, and
Mhm.
I'm from Texas, so it kind of reminded me of migas, which are
Yes.
except without the tortillas. It's like
Yeah.
a scramble with tomatoes and spices. There's a great spice mix that you use in it, a
Yep.
Yemeni
The
spice mix,
hawash.
and yes,
Yeah.
it's just delicious. I made it at work the other day
So
for colleagues,
simple.
and it was great. So, and that strikes me as the type of thing that it's different, but when people are paging through the book, you're gonna look at that and go,
I can
oh,
hopefully I can do that.
like I love it, like I
Yeah.
can do that. Yeah.
I love that.
I want to talk a little bit more about your growing up, your childhood. So before you were 7, you're living in Somalia.
Mhm.
Your mom had a goods store,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming she was doing the cooking in the family.
My mom never cooked until we got to the refugee camp, and she
Okay.
doesn't cook much now.
Okay.
But she does shout instructions. I think I say this in the book. I was responsible for boiling water for tea and pasta,
Yep.
and my brother was responsible for the shopping. And then we sold dry goods for
Yep.
about a year, and then we moved to Nairobi proper, where my mother bought a gold store that we still own till today.
Wow.
About 32 years later. And shortly after, I moved to Seattle, but my mother married the man from the market who does the money exchange, and she sent him to Norway as a student, so he filed for family reunification.
And that's how they ended up in Norway.
And that's how they ended up
and
there.
you reunited with them there. How did you first get into food? Like, how did you first get into you came through the packaged
Yeah.
goods route, and you still have
Mm-hmm.
a company. So how did that come about?
I mean, kind of like this book, I was in deep search of myself in 2014, and when I went back to Norway, my mom is an entrepreneur. She owns a furniture store and a goods store in Oslo. And my father is an entrepreneur also. He's a camel herder. And so when I went back to Norway, I just was thinking like things got to be different. I can make my life bigger. And some of my friends are here who used to sit with me at Mediva in Brooklyn, daydreaming. And very quickly, my mother and I were constantly in conversation, and she kept saying, maybe you just go back to school and work at the UN. And that was an option. But I really wanted to tell stories.
Yeah.
And I knew I could do better than the people that were telling the stories about us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became my vehicle, storytelling and consumer packaged goods.
And you had been modeling.
Mm-hmm.
So in this whole mix of things, you had also traveled the world.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that also informed your desire to tell these kinds of stories because you were exposed to so many different places.
I think my life has given me an interesting understanding of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And wanderlust, and constantly trying to figure myself out, and constantly reinventing myself at a very young age. I'm not like that anymore. I barely leave my couch now, Joe.
Welcome to the club.
Because I really do think when you're dreaming, like, you need a lot of downtime. So that's where the couch comes in. But I thought it was really important to be able to share these stories that I was learning along the way in these conversations. I lived in Cape Town in 2008, and before I went, my manager was like, "It's so dangerous." And I got there and I was like, "Oh my God, I've never seen water like this." And so this kind of stuff was born in me so long before even food came into my life, because it was so clear to me that the stories that we were starting to live by just weren't ours and didn't even consider us really.
Yeah, absolutely. So then fast forward from, you were traveling around, you started your own company, you wrote in BB's Kitchen. Everybody knows in BB's Kitchen, right? Right. Beautiful cookbook. Tell me about when you did some of the first trips for this book. Like, what were those trips like? What were some of the big moments that stood out to you that, when somebody said something or did something or you saw something that went, oh, can't wait to put this in the book?
Well, the first place I went to was El Salvador in 2020. I went February 2020 over
Oh,
Valentine's Day weekend
that
with
was
two
right before a certain
girlfriends.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so glad I did that because I think I was so excited to get the proposal done because I knew I had a big year coming up within BB's Kitchen. And so once I went to El Salvador, that really put the battery in my back in regards to like my friend who went with me, her mom lives in Johannesburg, and her mom was like, "You girls need to be careful. You got to get a private driver. Don't be out late at night." And Gabby and I got there and we're like, "What?" And so very quickly I was like, I want to know more about these people. I want to know
Mm.
about their food ways. They have grandmas on the side of the road cooking and selling food just like us. um, and so I think the main thing I really wanted to capture was the kindness and the generosity of the El Salvadorians more than anything.
It sounds like you're the kind of traveler that is particularly open to the people around you, and you don't necessarily believe the preconceived notions of a place.
Yeah, because I'm of that, right? Like when people tell me about Somalia, I'm like, oh, you've been there?
Right. Right.
Like,
Right.
Where'd that come from?
Right.
CNN?
Right. It is so true, right? I remember the first time I went to Mexico City, and the whole thing then in Mexico City was, do not catch a taxi on the street.
Oh,
As an American, you will be beheaded.
yeah.
It was like, really?
You will be kidnapped.
Like every American who catches a taxi on the street in Mexico City ends up beheaded. Yeah. So
What an
there's
odd
lots of
thing
that.
what an odd, these flattened stories are so
Yes.
interesting to me.
Yes, but your whole mission, it seems like, is to put color on those, black and white shadows
I just
of
want to ask the
ideas.
questions.
Yeah,
I mean, you've done that with food in the way that you talk about
try to.
vegetables.
Try to.
You make it really beautiful and
Thank you.
accessible. You make room for it in food media.
Yeah, yeah,
That's kind of what I want to do with these stories.
yeah. It's great. It's great. So, to the reader, thinking about the reader now, there's so much more in the book than recipes, and yet of course recipes are, the entry point for people and the cooks who are going to take the book into their kitchen. And the book is so much about the ways in which food helps us understand and connect to people. How do you imagine someone using the essays and the depictions of these places in your book and the recipes in a way that also helps foster understanding and connection? Like, what do you want people to do?
Yeah, I want the reader to come for the recipes, and then I want them to do their own investigative work and to ask the questions. And so there are helpful tool guides in the book, like a timeline in the back of the book that shows you what happens to a region and then what happens in a country and then what happens to the region around it. And then there's a QR code in the book that allows you to call the thing what it is. So we're not constantly calling it eggs in purgatory.
Right.
Or we're not calling it cauliflower, tahini cauliflower. You're calling it by its name. And I want us to be able to learn together. I think we've done a really good job of reimagining the same thing over and over, and it's like time to do a new thing.
Yes. I'm thinking all of a sudden, what popped into my head was when you said reimagining the same thing over and over. And I apologize to anyone who's a huge fan of the following out there. But when I first heard about the show and the name of the show that Stanley Tucci was doing called Searching for Italy,
Yeah.
and I was like,
We haven't found it
I
yet?
think we found it. I think we found every little corner of Italy. I love Italy.
Italy's done.
I love it. I love it.
Italy
I
too.
love it. I love it. But I don't think we're discovering anything new. And this is completely different.
Yeah, we love you, Stanley. If you're listening to
I
this.
do love Stanley. I do love Stanley. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the other recipes in the book. Like, what are some of the things that you would want to make sure people see or go to if they're going to pick up the book?
Yeah, there's a cauliflower recipe with tahini in it, which is an easy intro. I think people are often frightened by oil and cooking, by frying and by cooking with oil.
Yes.
I suggest that you get a great thermometer.
Yeah.
I was cooking for someone the other day and they had one you point. I was like, whoa.
Oh.
I was like, this is so fancy.
Yeah.
And it like reads it for you.
The laser thing.
The laser thing. I'm sure you all have that at the Washington Post.
No.
Oh, no. But if you get a good thermometer, like this is such a simple recipe. It is garlicky, it's earthy, it's lemony. It comes together super fast. It cooks in 4 minutes. And I think not only does it help the reader and the cook get into frying, but it also helps you make something so simple and nutritious. And it helps you play with flavors that you're not used to if you don't cook from places like this.
Yeah, I thought, what country was that from? That's
Lebanon.
From Lebanon, yeah. Mm-hmm. The thing that I remember noticing and loving when I looked at that recipe was that the cauliflower is fried without being coated or breaded in anything.
Yep.
So I think that's really cool for people to know that sometimes you can just, I mean, we do it with potatoes. Like, why not do it with other things? You can just fry it.
Till it's golden, put it to the side, drizzle it with some tahini, a little bit of salt, a little bit of squeeze of lemon, and boom.
What?
Stuff it in a pita, eat it on the side.
What more could you want from that? Yeah. What more do you want?
It's
what
actually
else?
Good for you.
It is really good for me. I'm going to make that.
Yeah. And then recently I've been really falling for this omali. It sounds like I'm in love, but I am. It's from the Egypt chapter. It's days-old croissant pulled apart and toasted in the oven, taken back out, and then with some heavy whipped cream, with pistachios and coconut, and then you put it back in and you take it out, and it is so delicious and so indulgent.
Well, my Lord, that
and
sounds
so
good.
simple to make.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So what's next? You're touring for the book, obviously. Are you thinking about your next projects yet?
Yeah. I'm currently in the process of selling 2 books, but my next one will be about examination of the lunch hour across the world.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
I really do want to see what happens when development takes over and mama and papa places are run over by these, big hedge funds and companies, and I want to know what happens to people. Do they move back to their villages? And I think there's a great story there to be told and one to be retained from our elder generation.
Yep, that sounds great. That's one of the books, Hawa.
Mm-hmm. The other one is about ritualistic eating around the globe. So what do you eat when you talk to God in Brazil? What do you eat when you climb Mount Everest? What do you eat when the king dies?
Great.
What do you eat when you give birth? So the sitting month in Taiwan.
Wow, that's great. And are you traveling for those? Mm-hmm. Are you? Wow, that's fantastic. What is the timing on those?
Just right back to back, but we're trying to do both at the same time so I can hopefully start a family.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, it's like this is too much work.
I think you should add the family to all that. It sounds like it would be so easy for you to do all of that at once. Yeah. I want to make sure that we have time for people to ask questions because I'm sure people have lots of things that they want to know about. So if you would, please come up to the microphone. If you don't come up to the microphone, then I have to repeat your question. And sometimes I do that in a super judgmental way. No, I just want you to use the microphone. Hi.
It's nice. I can be anonymous if I stand back here. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I'm here with some of my Lebanese friends, and they were really excited to have their country represented because, as you said, so often it is underrepresented and unemphasized in cooking. I'm curious to hear about other countries that maybe you started researching, you wanted to include, weren't able to get enough information, or if you had a second version of this book, what other countries would you want to include?
You know, when I was doing the research, I was getting really sad because it was becoming Middle East heavy and Africa heavy. And I was like, I've already done Africa. And I also just like don't want to keep telling that story about Africa. But I would have loved to include Syria. And I really did think including Lebanon was a service to Syria. But I wanted to go to Syria, and I was told it wasn't in my best
Hopefully
interest.
now you'll have an opportunity now that after the revolution and the regime is gone. So
My friend was there 2 days ago. It's stunning. I could not believe how beautiful and how much history is in everything, just like at the coffee shop. This is all from his Instagram, by the way.
Of course. I mean, where else do you get information about places? I don't even know. Books. That's right, books.
Hi,
Hi,
sir.
good. Thank you. Mine is a kind of a simple question, I think. It's just I'm curious if you've come across I'm sure you're familiar with the dish fool, F-U-L, and just to the extent in all your travels, how wide is there a sort of a different recipe in like 6 or 8 different countries or something more about? Not in the book,
Isn't there
but
Full is in your book, right?
I do have a
Yeah.
Oh,
you have
fool.
And Full is
I'm
in
no
Baby's
fool.
Kitchen. Yeah, I'm no Full.
You have a
Oh.
fool.
We have Full in Bibi's Kitchen. So they eat it in Somalia where I'm from, or they eat it in Eritrea, but they eat it also in Somalia. But it's not eaten as often as it is in Eritrea. I think the only difference I've seen is just the spices. So like in Yemen, it would be made with hawaj. In
Egypt.
Eritrea, it would be made with berbere.
But then Ethiopia and Egypt, of course. Sort of.
Somalia, Tanzania.
Yeah.
By the way, I was thinking opening a little cafe on Capitol Hill and calling it Fool on the Hill. What do you think?
Like
I
two
will-
use?
I
No,
will come. I will come.
If I could find a sliver of a...
I will come. Does everybody know what fool is? Yeah. No. I want you to explain it.
Well, as I understand it, when I've had several dishes of it, it's fava beans with tomatoes, onions. You can have it sort of yesom, meaning the fasting Ethiopian Orthodox. And other countries may have a version without dairy products. So I'm sorry, in short, fava beans, tomatoes, onions, sour cream and eggs, I think, if you have dairy products in it. And then I'm sure I'm missing 2 or 3 things.
And sometimes I've seen tahini in it.
Yeah.
And it's often breakfast. It's often.
So it's very simple and very filling, though. And you have it with beautiful piece of bread, of course, with
Flatbread, like scoop it up with flatbread. Yeah, yeah. You're no fool either, I can tell. Questions? Yes. One of the old friends has to come ask a question.
You probably already know the answer.
Well, I don't know the answer. First, I want to just say how I adore you. I love you. It's been amazing to watch you literally start from ideating Best and going from store to store with you in Brooklyn 10 years ago and really evolving and iterating and inspiring and doing so many things up to this point. You've been an inspiration to me, and I'm always like,
Sweet.
So there's that.
Sweet.
And then from a book development standpoint and brand development, I feel like there's so many things, but in your evolution from and expanding from East Africa and along the Indian Ocean and in Bibi's Kitchen, and spreading your wings globally beyond that. What was that process like for you, again, from a logistical standpoint, and if you felt like there were other considerations that you had to take into account, being that you were now going and exploring cultures outside of what is assumed to be our culture. But really, I know you've always identified as a citizen of a global citizen, and I completely agree with you. But what was that like from, trying to pitch that or sell that and make that come alive?
Um, Joe probably knows this. Selling isn't hard for me. It is what comes after selling, because the people that we're selling to are not, they don't really have an interest in being students of the subject. And so the onus is on you to do it well and to do it right. And so that's always a bit scary to me when it's outside of Africa. And so this time around, I felt the need to load my arsenal and make sure I had all the right people on my team, because there was just so much I didn't know. Um, and that was helpful to me because it helped me to learn. And so it took me a half a year over my manuscript being due, but I felt good because I was like, I'm getting these stories right.
Yeah.
Because the scholars are doing the work and they're advising me. And again, I just was so lucky that 10 Speed agreed to all of that, because I think very often people think that selling books are glamorous, but it's not. It's really hard, tedious work. And if you get it wrong, no one's going to correct you.
That's so true.
It's the craziest thing.
That's so
no one's
true.
going to correct you.
And it's not going to go anywhere because it's in a book.
Yeah.
Right, there it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to interject that what I was thinking about then too was, how true it is that I think so often, and this is, I'll just talk about in the food world, but this is certainly true in other areas of media too. But in the food world, people of color have been pretty much told in so many ways that they only should focus on the food of their homeland, of their background. And it's been the white people who have told the stories of the globe,
Co-opting.
Who've searched for Italy, and so I just want to make sure everybody understands that's just a really important, I think, thing to have your voice being the one that's illuminating these stories. It's not really a question.
Joe.
It's just
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, the Lebanese are very proud and prideful people, so I had to convince them that I would tell their story and tell it with integrity.
Yeah, I also just because I've got this Stanley Tucci thing on my mind now. Are you thinking about TV at all? Has that ever been part of your calculation?
I think it's always the North Star. I think it's a really fast way to get to the people. But I'm still convincing people that that's needed.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe I should go looking for Italy.
Yeah, really.
I have a question. For your next book, would you be open to talking about Palestine? I feel like it has a lot of it would be the perfect fit, I feel like, for your book, especially about the story of displacement. Is that something you would include in your next one, or?
I don't know. It's funny. I asked this woman in Singapore to write a blurb for me, and she responded, do you want to include Palestine? You still have time. And I was like, but there's so many incredible Palestinians telling their stories.
Yeah.
Especially in food. If anyone is interested, I would start with Palestine.
Yeah.
I mean, what a brilliant book from Otto Lengi's Test Kitchen in England.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know that I'm the right person for that story.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Questions? I knew there'd be more. Okay. Line up now, people.
Well, a comment and a question. So, it's what you prompted me to think about is I grew up here in D.C. I remember when this used to be a drugstore, but one of the things that's been great about growing up in D.C. and living here is that we got Afghani restaurants very early. and Lebanese restaurants really early. So I got to taste these wonderful dishes long before they made the mass media. And I wonder if there are other cities that may, I imagine some of the bigger cities also have the same thing. My question is, one of my favorite cuisines is Afghani, so it's great to see that you have it. So this is a bizarre question. I saw what you included, but you didn't include Kabili palau. And I wonder what was your thinking behind that, because that to me is one of my favorite dishes. And it's depending on where I go, I think the restaurant that's known, at least has gotten the attention of reporters like yourself, perhaps, for Afghani restaurants. I don't think is as good as the place it used to be on Wilson Boulevard that unfortunately closed on 9/11. So I just my thoughts about your thoughts about
Yeah.
Kabili palau and how it didn't make the cut.
Well, thank you for the comment. And to your question, it's so technical because for cookbooks, the 8 recipes have to make. So again, the 8 recipes are focused on what we thought reflected the kitchen of, right? And this is after much research and speaking to Afghani people, and then some vetoing a recipe that has been tested and researched to death, and some saying, try this one. I think this is better for the audience you're trying to reach and the kitchens you're talking about. And so a lot of it is based on technicality. And then the second part to that is when you're writing a cookbook, you want to make sure you don't have one too many thing of the same thing, right, Joe? So like you don't want to have rice in all 8 chapters.
Right.
So sometimes it just becomes technical.
So Kabili palau there were too many other rice recipes.
No, I think from very early on, people thought that there were 8 others that reflected an Afghani kitchen more.
They weren't your favorite dish.
I
What's that about?
Right.
Right. Where were you when we were doing the research?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so for my question, it's kind of similar but the opposite. I was going to talk about some of the dishes in Lebanon, like the first one, malfouf mahshi, which we were talking about. I haven't had it probably since I moved and probably 10 years before that. Right? Like it's one of the things I grew up with, but I didn't eat it as much. So like it represents us. But like, how did you get to finding these recipes? Because even in Lebanon, right, these are maybe like special occasion recipes or that aren't had in every household that you can find. Like there's a spoof as well.
Yeah.
One of my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, 8 recipes that we felt reflected each country, but some of the recipes are just special occasion recipes, right? Like recipes that are made on New Year or recipes that are made on Christian holidays. We had to include those. Some that are laborsome, like our date cookies, we had to include that, right? Because we think it's great education for the reader, but also does reflect of the country we're speaking of and the kitchens that we're doing the researches on. So my friend Omar advised us on a lot of these recipes, and he lives between Lebanon and Beirut and Egypt, and he was great help.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So sometimes I'm sure you ran into this in so many cultures, particularly the really popular dishes often vary so much, even family to family, village to village. How did you handle that? Like, were there any dishes where you worried that the version that you chose, that some people were going to be like, well, that's not how we make it?
Yeah, there's a rice dish in the Iraq chapter, and Ayad, who I feature, who's a master brewer, was so against the way that it was made because it's a laborsome recipe that is made in a underground stove and all of these things. And I was saying to him, I was like, that's a book, but it's not this book.
Right.
And so sometimes I kind of had to insert the research that we did in order to inform the recipe. And thank God for Amy Stevenson. Please pray for her. Because she did the legwork on a lot of these, the research bit of it. But, sometimes there's a little a pushback, and then we'd go to other people and they'd say, no, that's how I would make it if I weren't making it, like digging a hole and putting it underground.
Right. right. If I actually were in a modern
In
kitchen.
a commercial kitchen.
In a kitchen. Yeah. Questions? Oh, here we go.
All right, thank you. I have a question I think kind of builds on what you just asked, Joe, but looking at, and when you're looking at countries where you have people who've experienced displacement or have moved around, whether within their countries or are in the diaspora, how did you take into account sort of the ways that recipes then evolve and change based on either ingredients or the fact that you have people from different regions who are mixing together and kind of creating new compilations of certain recipes? How did you honor sort of the origin story, but also the new creations that people have come about from mixing and moving and being displaced?
I think the one thing that I come to understand in this book, and I knew in my own life, was that language changes, traditions change, but recipes in these countries and my own are told like orally and are shared in prep and making together. So very often they stay the same. But the other thing that I realized is that immigrants and displaced people are so incredibly resourceful. And so if they can't find fresh cilantro, which is their preferred herb, they'll get a dried one. And as you know, in many of these metropolitan cities, the Africans shop at the Mexican grocery store because there's, a crossover. We maybe don't use the ingredient in the same way, but we make our flavors out of it. And so what I hope this answers your question, but what I found in my research and in just making these recipes myself is that people adapt. And the number one thing they focus on is just the flavor.
How to get it, how to still get it, no matter what they've got access to. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you provide an example of any of the recipes that you looked at that you've seen, like the adaptations come through in different iterations?
No, I mean, in this book, we make suggestions, but there aren't any that we veered too far from. And you'll see, just like in BB's Kitchen, it's a very simple book to cook from. And that's by design.
That's music to most home cooks' ears, I would hope, right? Mm-hmm. You want to be able to just make something out of the book for dinner that night, right? Right. Any other questions?
Should we sign some books?
I think we should sign some books.
Oh,
question.
Lord.
Question, or are you just getting started on the signing?
Oh, my goodness. Hi. Not I always got a question.
Well, hopefully you didn't talk about this in the first 30 minutes because I was late. But for all the countries that you visited in this book, which one felt most like home? So that's the first question. And then second question, I'm an entrepreneur just like you. So you always know there's pain behind the product. Mm-hmm. In the journey of putting this together, can you speak a little to that? Was there any moment where you were like, I'm not going to be able to do this? And how did you press on?
Thank you for that. The first question, and I talk about this, and I think it's two things were happening in my life at the time. I needed rest. And when I got to Lebanon, I had booked a hotel right by the mosque, unbeknownst to me. And so the next morning when I woke up to go to the gym, the first thing I heard was the call of prayer, which instantly calmed me down. And so that's a special place that I carry with me. I really love Lebanon and had an incredible time traveling across that country. Then the second part is, I think food is a place where people say is a conduit for greatness and a medium for community and all these things. But the truth is that food is a system and we are behind the times. And so as much as I love doing this work, it's not work that's sexy. I mean, we're living in a time where if tonight an Instagram influencer was here, the lines would be out the door. And we've just started to put numbers before people. And so books like this, even though I love 10 Speed and I love my working relationship with our editors, they are not equipped to do the work that is needed to propel work like this forward.
Whew. As a fellow 10 Speed author, I would agree with you. I would agree with that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Let's sign some books. Oh, wait. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Let's sign some books.